You're no longer aligned with the culture we're building. That sentence ended everything. Not in private, not quietly, but in front of the entire senior leadership team, right as the Monday morning meeting began. It wasn't said with anger or empathy. Just corporate calm. Delivered by Dana Hughes, our brand new CEO. No warning. No lead-up. No dignity. The PowerPoint behind her still said quarterly operations review. I was holding a laser pointer. She was holding a decision. My name is Ryan Blake. I was the director of global operations at Argent Dynamics. I had been, for the past 8 years, until 9:08 a.m. that morning. That's when I realized the company I'd helped resurrect from the brink no longer had a place for me. She didn't ask me to stay behind after the meeting. She didn't suggest a private conversation. She didn't even say my name, just that line. And then, she moved on to slide 2. I remember the silence more than anything else. No one spoke. No one moved. It was like everyone forgot how. I looked around at the faces. Most of them I'd known for years. People I'd gone through crises with. People I'd gone to bat for. People I'd fought beside when our logistics pipeline was collapsing, when vendor contracts were falling through, when margins were tighter than a sealed gasket. Now, they looked down, looked away. Not one person stood up, and I don't blame them, because when you're in the presence of power, even artificial power, fear does the talking. I didn't respond, didn't defend myself, didn't ask for an explanation, just closed my notebook, removed my badge, and walked out. Quiet, controlled. It was the only way to preserve what little dignity Dana hadn't already stripped away, in that one cold, calculated sentence. I made it to my office without anyone saying a word. I locked the door, sat in my chair, and just stared. This space had been my war room, my nerve center, my anchor, and now, it felt like someone else's already. I started packing immediately. Not slowly, not frantically. Just intentionally. One box held the personal things. Photos, my old Army commendation plaque, a worn-out coffee mug that read, "I survived another logistics crisis." The second box was different. It held knowledge. Decades of it. My handwritten supply chain matrices. Vendor escalation trees. The old-school playbook that didn't exist on any server. The backbone of a system that kept this company breathing, while others suffocated. No one asked for a transition plan. No one even asked for my notes. Dana had no interest in continuity. She wanted removal, disruption, a clean break, to signal a new era, and she got it. Right as I was taping the last box, she appeared at my door. Posture soft, voice lower, like she'd just remembered the performance needed an emotional scene. 2. "Ryan, this isn't personal," she said, stepping slightly into the room. "We just need a more collaborative leadership style." I met her eyes. Calm, no malice, just clarity. I didn't say a word. There was nothing to say, because I knew something she didn't. She thought she was removing an obstacle, but what she had really done was remove the foundation. See? I didn't build Argent systems on convenience. I built them on relationships. Trust earned on the ground, not in spreadsheets. Our supplier network wasn't automated. It was human. I could tell you the name of the warehouse manager in Springfield who personally called me when ice storms hit his loading docks. I could recite the preferred shipping schedule for our freight partners in Topeka, down to the hour. You can't upload that to the cloud. When I joined Argent, we were weeks from insolvency. Their product was decent. Customized industrial robotics for specialized manufacturing. But the back end? A disaster. Half their deliveries were late. Raw materials arrived in inconsistent batches. The entire ops team was held together with duct tape and prayer. I was hired to fix it. Quietly, behind the scenes. My first year, I lived on the road. I didn't just call vendors, I showed up. At their loading docks. I shook hands. I asked questions. I learned their bottlenecks and their backup plans. I made them feel like partners, not pawns. By year 3, we had the most reliable supply chain in the region. We didn't just survive. We became the reason other companies failed, because their vendors prioritized us. By year 5, our revenue had more than doubled, 12.2 million annually. All without slashing quality. All without gutting headcount. All without selling our soul to offshore outsourcing. But Dana didn't care about that. She didn't see the machine. She only saw the dashboard. The moment she came in, she started replacing people with software, talking about procurement automation, digital vendor ecosystems, and streamlining redundancies. I raised concerns. She nodded politely and ignored them. She thought my approach was outdated, archaic. She never asked why it worked. She just wanted it gone, and I knew what was coming. So I prepared. The moment she canceled my quarterly supplier tour, called it unnecessary legacy travel, I began backing everything up. Vendor lists, contacts, contingency plans, not on company servers, in notebooks, on flash drives, because I'd seen it before. New leadership trying to make their mark by erasing what worked, replacing the reliable with the trendy, and I wasn't going to be caught unarmed. After I left the building that day, I didn't drive home. I took the long road north, past the old rail yard. There's an overlook above the river, where the freight trains crawl like veins through the trees. I pulled over and sat on the hood of my truck, watching the slow rhythm of cargo move along steel rails. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't have anywhere to be. At 2 p.m. on a Monday, and I wasn't panicking. I was planning. That night, my phone started buzzing. 3 messages, one from a procurement manager in Iowa, another from a freight coordinator in Denver, a third from our longtime metal fabricator. In Ohio, they'd heard, and they were confused. Ryan, is this true? Did they really let you go? Who do we talk to now? Please call me. I don't know what's happening. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I knew. The unraveling had already begun. 2 days later, I got a call from Thomas Redden, the VP of Milner Systems, one of our most loyal clients. He'd worked directly with me during the supply chain freeze of 2021, when we rerouted an entire delivery sequence in 12 hours to save his production line. Tell me this is a mistake, he said. It's not, I replied. He was quiet for a second, then said something I won't forget. Well, their loss. But Ryan, whatever you do next, keep me in the loop. We trust you, not the logo. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and just stared out the windshield. That's when it hit me. I didn't have to rebuild from scratch, because I hadn't lost the machine. I was the machine. What Dana failed to realize is that you can't remove the architect and expect the building to stand. You can't rip out the spine and expect the body to walk. She thought the revenue would continue, the contracts would renew, the deliveries would arrive. But everything she was betting on, every number she showed her investors, was built on relationships. And relationships don't survive indifference, they survive care. She'd replaced me with a software rollout and a PR blurb. And now, she was about to learn what happens when you treat people like replaceable parts. I wasn't angry, I was ready, and something told me she wasn't. 3 days after I walked out of Argent Dynamics, the silence broke. Not mine. Theirs. It started with a phone call from Joe Randall, one of my oldest vendor contacts. Joe runs Midland Fasteners, a family-owned operation out of Terre Haute. We built a trust over years. When weather shut down half the Midwest in 22, he rerouted shipments through Kentucky overnight, just because I asked. Joe doesn't do that for everyone. Ryan, he said, I got this new guy emailing me from Argent, wants to streamline our procurement alignment. I told him we already had a handshake agreement. You did, I replied. He laughed, but it wasn't joyful. He doesn't even know what parts we make, just asked for net 90 terms and volume discounts. Then Joe got quiet. They don't know how this works, do they? They think they do, I said. That was the first sign. Then came 3 more calls, all from suppliers I'd kept close for years. One said they were being asked to sign contracts without renegotiation. Another said their payment schedule was changed without warning. The third just asked, "Who's the new guy? He sounds like he's never walked a warehouse floor." Each one ended the same way. If you start something new, We'd rather deal with you. I didn't ask for that loyalty. I'd earned it. Meanwhile, I still hadn't heard a single word from Dana Hughes or anyone at Argent. No exit interview. No transition handoff. Not even a generic thank you email. That told me everything I needed to know. They believed I was a plug they could pull without sparking a fire. But fires don't always start with flames. Sometimes they begin in silence. I spent that week driving, not aimlessly, but intentionally. I visited old contacts, checked in with warehouse managers, sourcing agents, regional logistics teams. Not to recruit, just to say hello. Most of them already knew what had happened. Word travels fast in this world, especially when relationships are real. "You okay?" one of them asked. "Better than okay," I said. Because I was. Not bitter, not broken, just free. And that freedom felt like momentum. By the end of that week, I had 3 unofficial job offers and 1 consulting request. But none of them felt right. I didn't want to be someone else's fix-it guy again. Not this time. This time, I wanted to build. That's when I got a call from Julia Nevers. Julia was the CEO of Thermovac Solutions, a mid-sized lab equipment manufacturer that had been growing faster than it could handle. I'd met her once, at an industry dinner 2 years ago. She remembered me, said she'd heard what happened. "I need someone who can build an operation that doesn't collapse under success," she said. "Someone who understands people and process, not just platforms." She asked me to come see her facility. No formalities, just a walkthrough. So I did. It took me 10 minutes to see the problem. Too much tech, not enough trust. They had 5 layers of procurement automation, and 0 personal relationships with any of their top suppliers. I asked her how long it took to reroute a shipment if a vendor missed a deadline. "Depends what the system says," she answered. "That's the problem," I told her. We talked in her office for an hour after that. She asked me what I would do if I had full control. I laid it out plainly. Rebuild the network from the ground up. Bring in people I trust. Use tech to support decisions, not replace them. Create a hybrid chain, part data, part gut. She leaned forward. "And what do you need to make that happen?" "Autonomy," I said. "And trust." She nodded once. "You have both." By the following Monday, I had a desk at Thermovax. A temporary one. I didn't need a corner office or a title. What I needed was access to the floor, to the supply logs, to the human side of the machine. The first thing I did was make a list, not of vendors, of people. Those who still answered when I called. Those who didn't need a PDF to remember my name. Those who knew I always paid on time, and always called before making a change. Then I reached out, not to pitch, not to recruit, just to reconnect. And almost every call ended the same way. "So, what are you working on now?" Meanwhile, Argent was unraveling faster than I expected. I got my first inside update from Carlos Mendoza, a logistics manager I'd mentored during my 3rd year there. Smart guy. Quiet. Loyal. He'd stayed behind, hoping to survive the storm. "They're a mess," he said. "New vendor software rolled out this week. Nobody trained. Half the orders are stuck in limbo." I didn't laugh. I didn't feel vindicated. I just asked, "How's morale?" "Bad," he said. "Real bad. No one knows who's making decisions anymore. And Dana? She's blaming you." "Me?" "She told the board the old systems were sabotaged. That's why things are breaking." I stayed silent for a moment. "I didn't sabotage anything," I said. "I know," Carlos replied. "But she needs someone to blame." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched from a distance as the company I built slowly started to rot. Clients began pulling back. Deliveries missed. Deadlines pushed. Key accounts stalled. And Dana? She doubled down. More consultants, more dashboards, more canned speeches about innovation. That's when the messages started. First, an email. Polite. Hollow. "We'd like to request a brief conversation about legacy transitions." I ignored it. Then a voicemail. "Ryan, I think it would be mutually beneficial to clear the air. We're open to a paid consultation arrangement." I didn't return the call. She didn't get it. I wasn't withholding help out of spite. I just wasn't interested in fixing something she'd broken on purpose. and I wasn't alone. One morning, I got a text from Thomas Redden at Milner Systems, the client Dana had already lost. It was short. "You free for lunch?" We met at a steakhouse outside town. No suits. Just two men who'd been around long enough to understand the cost of arrogance. "Argent's circling the drain," Thomas said, cutting his steak. "We've already rerouted half our contracts. Other clients are starting to jump ship too." "What do you need?" I asked. "A stable supply partner. Someone who knows how to keep promises." I took a sip of water. "Thermovax doesn't manufacture the same components." "But you could," he said, "with the right line setup. And if you do, we'll lock in a 3-year volume contract, minimums included." That changed everything, because now we didn't just have a growing company, we had leverage. When I brought the proposal to Julia, she didn't blink. "This gives us expansion capital and client credibility," she said. "Let's do it." I spent the next week designing a new production line. The kind that could absorb Argent's collapse and give those workers a soft landing, if we moved fast enough. At the same time, I kept getting messages from inside. Carlos, 2 senior engineers, even one of the board members I used to brief quarterly. "They're scared," one said. "Revenue is cratering. Dana's panicking." But it wasn't panic yet. Not the kind that causes real change. Not until they saw me again. That moment came when I reached out to Harold Stenwick, Argent's retired founder and a man who still held 15% of its stock. He'd been watching from the sidelines. "They're bleeding cash," he said, "and the board's begging for a turnaround." "What if we offered to buy what's left?" I asked. He went quiet. "You serious?" "Completely." "Who's the buyer?" "Thermovax, quietly, cleanly, we save the jobs, absorb the assets, leave Dana behind." Harold was silent again. Then he laughed, low and honest. "You always were the long game type." We met 2 days later. I laid out the numbers, the capacity, the strategic gain. Then I looked him in the eye and said, "I don't want revenge." He nodded. "I believe you. I want to make sure no one else has to clean up her mistakes." And just like that, the first seed was planted. Not of war, but of takeover. 3 weeks after Dana Hughes fired me in front of a silent boardroom, she showed up in mine, this time silent herself. I watched her on the security feed, standing stiff in the Thermovax lobby. She was overdressed for a manufacturing facility, in a navy blue suit that looked more runway than real world. Her expression was polite, but her jaw was tight, just barely clenched. She spoke with my receptionist and asked to see me. "I'm afraid Mr. Blake is unavailable today," my assistant said, following the exact instructions I'd given her earlier that week. "If she ever comes here, don't let her in." Dana waited 20 minutes. She scrolled her phone, crossed and uncrossed her arms, then walked out without a word, heels clicking against polished concrete. She never even made it past the front desk. An hour later, her email arrived. "Ryan, I believe it's time we talked. We're encountering vendor issues that are affecting critical fulfillment. I'd appreciate 10 minutes of your time. I'm sure there's mutual value in connecting." I deleted it. I wasn't being cold, I was being clear. She had burned the bridge. I just left the fire alone. At the time, I was already knee-deep in transformation at Thermovax. We'd just signed the 3-year deal with Milner Systems, and I'd begun sketching out a new production line to accommodate their custom parts. I'd brought in 2 of my best former engineers, both of whom had also been shown the door at Argent during Dana's modernization wave. Their talent was undeniable, their loyalty unshakable. We moved fast. By week 5, our lead times had dropped by 36%. Customer complaints were down by more than half. And most importantly, vendors were calling us, asking what else they could help with. One even said, "It's just nice working with humans again." That same week, Carlos Mendoza sent me a secure file. He'd been keeping me updated on Argent's unraveling since the day I left, but this time the numbers told the full story. The vendor dashboard was in chaos. 4 suppliers had halted shipments. 2 had increased prices by double digits due to unstable leadership. Internal comms were flooded with escalations. And Dana? She was spinning. Her latest leadership memo had been titled, "Resilience Through Rapid Change." One line stood out, "We're evolving faster than our vendors can adapt." That wasn't evolution. That was collapse. Then came the voicemail. It was her voice, but stripped of the practiced calm. Tense, controlled, trying too hard to sound casual. Ryan, I know things didn't end smoothly, but we could use your insight. There's been some transition friction. We'd be open to structuring compensation. Let's talk? I let it play out, then hit delete. Still no reply. I wasn't playing hard to get. I was done playing altogether. That Friday, Julia Nevers and I sat down for our third strategic review. She looked at the latest operations report and smiled. "You've built something solid," she said. "Better than we expected." "I didn't do it alone," I replied. "I just brought the right people and listened." She leaned back. "What's your read on Argent?" I didn't hesitate. 4 weeks out from a liquidity panic, maybe less. She nodded slowly. "You still think we can absorb them?" "With the right plan," I said. "Yes. But we wait. They're not desperate enough yet." We spent the weekend preparing quietly. Thermavax's finance team ran models. Our lawyers reviewed potential asset structures. I began sketching the transition plan. Not just how to absorb the company, but how to save the right parts of it. The talent, the equipment, the vendor history, the legacy that mattered. Dana wouldn't be included. Monday morning, Harold Stenwick called. Harold had been Argent's founder, the man who hired me 8 years ago and later sold 85% of his stake to a group of short-term investors who promised growth. He'd kept the remaining 15% out of pride, or guilt. Maybe both. "Ryan," he said. "They're bleeding. Dana's trying to hide it, but the board is catching on. They just lost the Vanth contract. That's $2 million in annual revenue, gone overnight." I exhaled slowly. Vanth had been a long courtship. I'd built that relationship over 14 months of visits, demos, and crisis response. I knew it wouldn't last under Dana's model, but hearing it still stung. "She's blaming vendor hostility," Harold said, "claiming you sabotaged the network." "I haven't contacted a single vendor since I left," I replied calmly. "They left her. I know that. But perception matters. She's spinning it as a personal vendetta. She made herself irrelevant to the people that mattered. All I did was move out of the way. She's rattled. And the investors, they're starting to panic. They want out. Quietly." "Would they sell?" I asked. "If there's a buyer ready to move fast?" "Yes." "Then we are." Later that afternoon, I got a message from Eleanor Hayes, Argent's former head of finance. We'd worked closely. She was precise, ethical, no nonsense. Her message was short. "Can we meet?" We met at a coffee shop near the industrial park. She looked exhausted, thinner. Her eyes held the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. "They're collapsing from the inside," she said. "Dana's throwing around blame like it's confetti. Everyone's walking on eggshells." "And you?" I asked. "I handed in my resignation last night." I wasn't surprised. "I can't stay there and watch it burn," she said. "And I refuse to be part of whatever cost-cutting they've got planned next." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were internal projections. Argent's runway was down to 8 weeks, 6 if any more contracts vanished. Their top vendors were now marked as non-responsive. And their cash flow was choking on late fees and renegotiations. "Ryan," she said softly, "this isn't just a failing CEO. It's a controlled demolition. The investors want to flip. They thought Dana could force a 20% margin leap in under a year, but they underestimated what you'd built and what it cost to replace." I nodded. I knew it already, but hearing it confirmed what I needed. "Can they recover?" I asked. "Not under Dana, and probably not under anyone they'd trust." Then she said something that stayed with me. "They didn't fire you because of your leadership style. They fired you because you were the only one who would have pushed back. You would have asked real questions, challenged impossible targets, and they couldn't have that. So they made an example," I said. She nodded. "And now? No one's speaking up." We parted ways with a quiet handshake, but I felt something shift as I walked to my car. I wasn't just building something new. I was preparing to take back what never should have been lost. That evening, I met with Julia again. I gave her the updated numbers, the projections, the staffing plans. I told her about Eleanor, about Harold, about Vanth and Milner, and every other piece of the puzzle, falling perfectly into place. "This is the moment," I said. She looked across the table. Calm, steady. "Make the call," she said. 3 weeks after that call to Julia, everything was in motion. The board at Argent Dynamics had no idea who was behind the acquisition offer. Harold acted as the liaison, just as we planned. On paper, it looked like a quiet proposal from a private investor group looking to stabilize a distressed company. The offer was firm, slightly below valuation, but generous enough to look like a lifeline. The investors didn't argue. They were too desperate. "Did they ask who the buyer is?" I asked Harold. "They're more concerned with making it disappear before the next quarter hits," he said. "They're bleeding, Ryan. Every week they wait, the terms get worse." Good. We moved quickly. Julia's team began preparing the integration roadmap, HR alignment, asset inventory, operational review. My job was different. Mine was personal. We weren't buying a company. We were restoring what had been broken. 2 weeks later, the meeting was set. Monday morning, Argent's headquarters. Same boardroom, same building. Exactly 3 months to the day since Dana fired me in front of a room full of silent executives. I wore a gray suit, simple, clean, not flashy. Just enough to remind them that I was never the enemy, just the one they underestimated. Julia walked beside me as we entered. Her team followed, legal, finance, operations. We stepped into the conference room at 8:59 a.m. Dana was already seated. When she saw me, her face didn't move, but her eyes did. Widened just slightly, then narrowed, like she was trying to recalibrate what she was seeing. "What is this?" she asked, looking from Harold to Julia, then finally back to me. Harold remained calm. "Ryan Blake is here representing the acquiring party." Dana stood up, voice sharper. "This is a joke. We are not selling this company to him." But the lead investor, Jeffrey Pearson, cleared his throat. "We've signed the preliminary agreement. Thermovax is acquiring Argent's operational assets. Mr. Blake will oversee the integration." Dana turned red. "You can't do this. He's the reason we're in this mess. He sabotaged vendor relationships. He poisoned our pipeline." I stepped forward slightly, voice low but steady. "I haven't spoken to a single Argent vendor since the day you fired me. I'd be happy to provide phone logs, emails, and written statements. What happened wasn't sabotage, it was gravity." She glared. "Then why are they all gone?" "Because relationships are earned, not inherited, and you treated them like line items." Julia stepped in then, professional and sharp. "We're here to finalize the terms of the acquisition. Our goal is to preserve as many jobs as possible, retain the functional parts of your infrastructure, and rebuild the trust. You lost. This is a rescue, Dana, not a coup." Dana looked at the investors for backup. None came. Jeffrey only said, "The vote is final. Your services won't be needed during the transition." She gathered her folders with shaking hands. "You planned this," she muttered. "You set me up to fail." "No," I said, voice soft. "You failed because you ignored everything that worked, and everyone who made it work." She left without another word. Once the door clicked shut, the room breathed again. The legal process took hours, but when the signatures were complete, I stepped outside for a moment. Not to gloat, just to breathe. I looked out across the parking lot, to the same spot where I once stood carrying a box of memories and silence. Now, I was carrying something different. Responsibility. We renamed the division Thermovax Argent. Not for branding, for respect. The people inside that building had endured months of chaos, uncertainty, and mismanagement. They deserved continuity. They deserved someone who saw their value. Over the next month, I spent more time on the floor than in my office, talking to machinists, schedulers, junior buyers, freight handlers. Not once did I mention the past. I just asked, "What's broken? What's still working? What do you need?" Their answers built the future. We kept 185 of the original 220 staff. The rest were offered positions at our other sites, or generous severance. No mass layoffs, no hollow speeches, just honest transitions. I reached out to every vendor personally, every single one. Some were cautious, some were relieved. All of them listened. Because I wasn't selling a system. I was restoring a promise. At Thermovax Argent, we rebuilt the network from the ground up. No software shortcuts, no flashy dashboards. Just people solving problems with other people. Fast, direct, respectfully. By the end of Q2, our retention rate had climbed back to 93%. On-time delivery was at 97.4%. Clients who had walked away were now calling back. Things feel real again, one vendor told me. Like we're part of something that matters. Revenue followed. Thermovax Argent crossed 20 million in annual run rate by the end of the fiscal year. And Julia? She kept her word. I was given equity, not just a title. Ownership. I'd gone from being fired without warning to building something that couldn't be bought. 6 months after the acquisition, I was walking the production floor when Brian, a former junior planner at Argent, approached me with a tablet. Midland Fasteners just confirmed shipment 3 days ahead of schedule, he said. Also, Valeri Components approved the new contract terms. I nodded. We'll go visit them in person next month. He paused. By the way, you hear anything about Dana? I shook my head. Not since the board meeting. I heard she's with a firm in Chicago now, private equity, running operations on a new turnaround project. I looked across the floor, machines humming, forklifts moving with rhythm, workers smiling. I wonder if she learned anything, he said. I didn't answer right away. Probably not the right lesson, I thought. Because people rarely do. That night, I stayed late at the office, finishing a transition report. I wasn't tired. I wasn't stressed. I was steady. Harold stopped by on his way out. He'd stayed on as a consultant, easing into semi-retirement. You rebuilt it, he said, leaning on the doorframe. Better than before. I smiled. It wasn't about revenge. He grinned. Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night. I chuckled. But he wasn't wrong. That wasn't what drove me. It wasn't about proving Dana wrong. It was about proving that what we built the first time was never luck. It was intention, care, people over process. Later that evening, I drove back to that old overlook near the river, the same spot I sat the day I lost everything. The barges were still there, slow, relentless, moving forward 1 inch at a time. And I realized that's all this ever was. Quiet movement. Not rage, not chaos. Just one man, refusing to let something good die. Not for ego, not for applause, but because the work meant something. Because the people mattered. Because someone had to hold the line. That was enough. That was everything.